Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks all for joining in today. While we're waiting to get started, if folks want to start introducing themselves in the chat, you can let us know where you're calling in from, what's your organization or perhaps college affiliation if you're a student or connection to FRN. We'll get started in just a few minutes to let folks join. Hello for the folks that just joined in. We'll get started in just a few minutes. I see some folks starting to engage in the chat. Hello. We have Kathy, who's a friend of Tina, who's our board president. Thanks for joining us. Rachel who's an FRN alum. Awesome. Amazing. Yeah, keep it coming through the chat while we get started in just a minute or so. Hi, Jane, one of our amazing funders. Thanks for joining us from Now On Fund. Another student, hello, with the George Washington chapter in DC. Hi, Colin. Well, our friends at Plan are here today. Hi, Chelsea, thanks for joining. Amazing. Well, please keep sending us engagement throughout the chat. This is meant to be an interactive time. You can keep introducing yourself in the chat, saying hi to other friends that you might be seeing in the chat. Definitely use the chat as a function to continue asking questions, having conversation as we continue this conversation here today. I want to welcome you all officially to Food Recovery Network's Biannual Roundtable Talks. Before we dig into the good stuff, some housekeeping items. Like I said, you can continue to engage through the chat. We also have the Q&A function, which you can submit your questions in there, and we'll try to get to as many as we can towards the end of the conversation here today. Also, the session is being recorded, but we can't see or hear you, but the chat is being recorded as well, just so you know. So to officially dig in, for folks that may not be familiar with Roundtable Talks, these are a great opportunity to learn more about the work of Food Recovery Network. We like to share our goals at the start of the year, which took place at our last Roundtable Talks in September. And then now here in March, we're looking back at what we've accomplished throughout our program year, just a little over halfway through our program year that runs from July to June, and just give progress on our updates and goals for the coming year. So I'll introduce our speakers here today. First, I'll kick it off to Regina Anderson Harmon, our Executive Director. Regina, if you want to share some opening words.
Thanks so much, Cassie. Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to see all of you, our incredible alums, our current student leaders. Thank you to our funders and everyone who has joined to be with us today. I'm just so thrilled to talk with everyone, and please do send us your questions and your thoughts. I'm really looking forward to a conversation, that involves all of us. So thanks, Cassie.
Thank you, Regina. Another one of our hosts is Katie Jones, FRN's Chief Operating Officer. Katie, if you want to share some open thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today and looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, Katie. And finally, we have Kimmy on the call who's giving support to any tech. So if anyone's having any issues, you can chat over Kimmy and she can help you out. And then also before we dig into the nitty gritty, we want to launch a couple of polls. So Kimmy, if you can launch our polls, we're curious to see who's on the call with us here today. So if you can share your affiliation with FRN, I'll let Kimmy launch that poll. Perfect. Thanks, Kimmy. So yeah, if you could just answer what you feel like best describes you. Maybe you're an FRN student or alumni, a hunger fighting nonprofit partner, if you're with higher ed or food business. Maybe our food recovery verified food business supporters. We'll leave it up just for a couple more seconds.
And Cassie, I see that Christina has raised their hand. Not
Oh,
sure.
thank you.
Yeah, if Christina, if you meant to do that, and hello.
Yeah, hi Christina, thanks for joining us. Yeah, chat is Christina if you're having any issues with tech or something maybe. Amazing. And Kimmy, I'll let you finish out the poll and you can share with our folks here so we can all see. Amazing. Lots of community supporters. We have a couple of students and alumni on the call, some hunger fighting partners. Amazing. This is a good spread. Thank you all. Finally, we'll launch our next poll. Curious for the folks that have joined Roundtable Talks before or not. Have you joined FRN's Roundtable Talks? Amazing. Just leave it up for just a couple more seconds. All right, Kim, you can go ahead and stop the poll and we'll share results. Amazing. There's a good amount of folks that have not attended a roundtable talk before. I'm not sure if other people. Kimmy, were you able to end the poll? On my end, it's still open. Oh, perfect. No, it just updated. Amazing. Well, yeah, there's a good amount of folks that have not attended a roundtable talk before. So welcome. Glad to have you here with us. And again, it's just an opportunity to learn more about the work of Food Recovery Network and give an update on our progress. So thank you all for sharing and joining in here today. To continue on, we want to thank our amazing funders, including I know there's a few of you on the call here today. Really appreciate your support for our work and really driving our programs here forward. So thank you so much for the folks that are supporting our work and continue to do so, whether you're an individual or an organization. So especially since we have so many new folks here on the call, and also for the folks that have joined before, want to just ground us in what the goals of the conversation are here today. We see these as an opportunity to really be transparent about our data and our key learnings. Like I said, last September, we shared our goals for this program year. And so now halfway through the year, we want to provide progress updates on what we've accomplished so far, what we've learned so far. And we also want to develop a feedback loop with our partners, with all of you on the call, as we have a variety of different audiences across our nationwide network. We want to provide an opportunity for you to understand what we're thinking about, what goals we're reaching towards, and be able to share your input. So please continue to engage in the chat, share your comments, your questions. We really want to hear all the input. And we see all of that as a key piece of building stronger relationships with the folks in our network. So the next piece I wanted to share just briefly for the awesome students on the call, thanks so much for your amazing work with FRN. If you're not already aware, we have this fun Bold a Bracket bingo event happening right now through the 31st of March. And it runs from the Super Bowl all the way through the end of the March Madness bracket for basketball. And it's just an opportunity for students to engage in a variety of different activities that maybe your chapter hasn't engaged in before, and also to be able to raise funds for your chapter and for the amazing work that you do. So please participate if you haven't already. Kimmy just sent some more information in the chat and let us know if you have any questions. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Regina, to kick us off.
Great. Thanks again, Cassie. And welcome everyone again, and just really wanted to keep in mind for all of you that this is a first time joining us for one of our biannual roundtable talk conversations. We often, when we have these communications with our larger group of stakeholders, want to give space to make several acknowledgements. For me and many on the national staff, we're headquartered in Washington, D.C. I live in Northern Virginia. And so I am on the land of the Piscataway Conoy. In this acknowledgement, we have, how the tribe, also known as the Bander family, refer to themselves. And I haven't been able to find an actual audible on how to pronounce that, their name. And so I often avoid it because I don't want to just sound terrible, trying to pronounce that. But wanted to just give space to honor the Piscataway Conoy for being stewards of our land, our water, our air, well before, many of us and our ancestors, came to what is now known as the United States. Part of, again, for all of you who haven't been part of these conversations, you might be familiar with our framework, our strategic framework. And in that, we are working to close ethnic and racial disparities. And we believe, part of what we're seeing, the reason why so many people don't have the access to the food that they deserve is because of, a history of systemic racism in the United States. And it's a system that is working the way that is intended to work. So we want to honor those who whose land we work on and that we live on. And at Food Recovery Network, we believe that Black Lives Matter, and we stand with our Asian community. There are so many groups that have been marginalized, that experience high rates of violence and discrimination, and giving space with love and respect to those groups, and our offering of our work to, again, change a system that we think could work better for all of us. The next slide, to sort of tie all this together, because we think about, FRN, we're here to ensure that our food system works better for everyone, that food is a right. And when we think about food as a bridge to other ways that we can treat folks, we want to make sure that we give space to that connection. So last month was Women's History Month. No, other way around. I always get this wrong because every day is history, but February is Black History Month. This month is Women's History Month. And so I kind of wanted to combine those things to give some space to somebody that I find personally inspiring, Rebecca Lee Crumpler, who became one of the country's first African American physicians. She became a physician even before the Civil War had ended, and wanted to put everybody into that space. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler conducted her work soon after the Civil War ended. Emancipation had been granted to millions of enslaved people who at that point hadn't taken it for themselves or who were born free. And I wanted to just put us into this space of, the things that Dr. Crumpler saw, and that was people who were underfed, undernourished, and living in very dire conditions, and then systematically denied access to medical care, to land, so they could feed themselves. And it was through the advocacy of a very brave doctor to provide medical treatment, food access to people in her immediate community, and knowledge to others around her who could then bring that knowledge to other further off communities. That is a big part of our history, and just wanted to give some space to that, as we also think and honor and recognize the food systems of our Native community that had been decimated even before the Civil War. So hunger has been prevalent in what we now call the United States from the very beginning. And we think about it in terms of, the Industrial Revolution here in the United States, when we started to actually track that. But in honor and giving space, wanted to recognize Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler and all of her efforts to support people getting access to the food that they deserve. And so again, for so many of you, this might be your first conversation here, but I invite all of you to dig into our website and to some of our other conversations where we give a lot of space to our strategic framework that I just mentioned to close ethnic and racial disparities, what we call FRN 10X. And our big vision for Food Recovery Network is we believe that nobody should experience hunger. And so we seek to recover food, to feed everyone who's experiencing hunger in the United States. It's a big lift, it's a big ask, and we don't do that work alone. And this conversation is insight into our current goals, what we have set out to do, and where we're at, in achieving those goals. I don't know if you wanted to. Great. And so we're halfway through our program year. It's always so exciting to be here. There's so much celebration that needs to happen. And so we're excited to do that with all of you. So thank you again for your time. Please keep your questions coming. I'm going to chime in, but at this moment, to walk us through or bring us further in to what we've been able to achieve in that celebration, I wanted to turn things over to FRN COO Katie Jones.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Regina. In my role as COO here at Food Recovery Network, I oversee programs, communications, operations, and also help with development. So the reason I'm reporting on these particular goals is because largely I oversee the programming that contributes to them. And as Regina put so well, the result we seek in the world is huge. And so part of what these conversations are meant to do is keep us accountable to how we are contributing to that result. And the way we do that is by establishing a series of goals throughout the year and then reporting midway, which is the purpose of the conversation today. And then also in August/September, we'll report on what we did this prior year regarding our students, and then also what our goals are for the upcoming year. So as you see these goals, they're ones that we sent back in August, and now this is our midway point to tell you how it's going. And the first is to recover 1 million pounds of food, as well as engaging in major events. And what I can tell you now, I've been at FRN for 4 years. If you had told me 4 years ago that consistently FRN can recover more than 1 million pounds of food, we would be very surprised. But yes, that is where we are. Even midway through the year, we're closer to 2 million pounds now. And that's really been through diversifying where we recover across the food supply chain. So one of the changes that we've made over the last several years is we now recover on large commercial farm fields like you see, which obviously gives us a huge amount of yield. We also continue our chapter-based work. We also expanded into event work, and we also have some targeted work that I'll get into in a little bit. So we are well on our way to surpassing this goal, and probably will end up around 3 million pounds by the end of this year. Part of how we do that now is also through a series of targeted events. And one of the things we learned through our strategic framework is that obviously hunger exists in every zip code, but it doesn't exist equally in every zip code. So what are some of the ways that FRN could get more precise about how we are getting fresh produce, fresh surplus produce into the areas where it's most needed? And over the last 3 years, we have partnered with Atlanta, a series of Title I elementary schools that are specifically in food deserts, or the Atlanta Department of Public Education has said these particular communities have a hard time accessing food for a variety of reasons. So now once a month, FRN hosts a series of pop-up farmers markets on the campuses of Title I schools, all with surplus produce that was grown around Georgia. And so again, it is our way of bringing food very precisely to where it is most needed, but also partnering across the sectors, the government sector being the nonprofits, the government being the education, obviously other nonprofits that we partner with to source the food, also putting economic viability back into the communities by compensating the farmers for the surplus produce. And then it also has provided a really great opportunity for our students to plug in, where they can also continue to partner with the community. And one of the other ways that we continue to supplement this work is, in addition to having the pop-up farmers markets, there's also a community refrigerator component. So all of the surplus from the markets goes into community refrigerators that can then be recirculated and provide more consistent access. And I spend a lot of time on this because this is really FRN's most holistic solution to date about how we are getting food where it is most needed consistently, and also trying to deliberately overcome a lot of the obstacles that keep people from accessing food, such as, transportation issues or hours that things are available. So our ability to bring food where it's most needed, when it's most needed, has proven to be a really important learning for how we could work in the future. So while this is a newer piece of work, it's a very promising piece of work. So I wanted to just give a little bit of space to that. Another way that we've also started to be more precise is around how we partner with events and large scale recovery on a more routine basis. So one of the things that we have launched over the last 2 years, and again has become a very no pun intended, but fruitful program, has been our partnership with the Gaylord National Convention Center in Prince George's County, Maryland, which again is right over the border from Washington, D.C., which is one of our target areas where we have identified we can put more food into that food system and feed more people faster. So now we actually have a twice a month routine recovery with the Gaylord, where all of their surplus food gets redistributed to key areas and key nonprofit partners, specifically also in community fridges in affordable housing complexes, as well as various large-scale social service agencies in Washington, D.C., which again is just another model and a new way that we've been working, which has been a great way to partner cross-sector with the various communities, be very precise about where we're putting our food, and then also giving us an opportunity to work differently to also help with business practices of some of the area businesses. So this is another one where very quickly it's racked up a lot of pounds, but more than that, it's racked up a very significant model of how we can continue working in the future. So one more slide, and then I'll stop to see if Regina has anything else to add. So as we're working in different ways, it's important to note that our students also continue to work in different ways. When FRN was originally started, students could largely only participate through recovering food. And over the last several years, we have expanded the ways that students can be active in the movement, which includes volunteering with local partner agencies, as well as advocacy efforts on the local, state, and federal level. And what has been wonderful to see is as we have expanded these offerings to our students continue to take us up on really exploring every option possible to help reduce food waste in their communities. And this gives you a little bit of a snapshot into how our students are doing that. So with that, let me stop before I go on to our second goal. Regina, is there anything you would add?
Only a couple of things, Katie. Thank you so much for that. First is I was remiss to say hello to Tina, our amazing board president. So thank you so much, Tina, for your leadership and joining with this. But based on what Katie was saying to everyone, you'll see a lot throughout getting to know us more. Again, for all of you, if this is your first time joining for this particular kind of conversation, you'll see throughout how we talk about the work is really getting into those communities and finding solutions with students at the helm whenever possible, but getting into spaces within the community where it is the convenience of the folks who need the food. And so knowing that the community refrigerator program is happening, is it 1 million pounds a week through those refrigerator programs yet? No, it's not. But do those meals completely matter to the people in those buildings? It absolutely does. And that is, part of, I'll have more to say about this in terms of, how slow moving the work can be sometimes, and why, and there's different levels to, what we mean by slow, but also really working on FRN telling that full story of who is gaining access to food that didn't necessarily have access or that ease of access before FRN worked within the community. So just wanted to highlight a couple of those things, Katie.
Great, thank you. So now I'll move on to our second goal, which is really about how we support and engage our student chapters in work that they're already doing, as well as how we're specifically targeting new chapters. Again, one of the things that we found is that our model is incredibly replicable, particularly around four-year universities. But again, our model can have more impact if we can be in specific communities, because there is both a high amount of surplus food, as well as a large number of people experiencing hunger, as well as the existing infrastructure of higher education. So that is why we have put this goal into place. And similarly to our first goal, we are well on our way. We've already surpassed having half of our new chapters be in our target states. And again, I think we will end the year somewhere between 30 and 32 new chapters, with half of those being in our target states. The next goal that we set really has to do with how we continue to forge those deeper connections and work in different ways, but also contribute in different ways beyond food. So the biggest highlight we have to share about this is about our partnership this year at the Super Bowl was with Hellmann's, where both current, potential, and alumni met us in Las Vegas, where we recovered surplus food from the players' tailgate that happened right before the Super Bowl. One of the great things about this event is, number one, it is an opportunity for potential, current, and alumni to come together to do work that they love. But also, this is such a high-profile event, so the surplus food that we're recovering is generally incredibly high-quality ingredients that the partner agencies don't usually have access to. So it's a favorite event of ours for a number of reasons, but most importantly, that again, we are getting the quality of food to where it's most needed. We've also hosted a series of opportunities for the students to connect over and over again. We hear that students want to talk to each other about how they're doing that work. And they want the opportunity to troubleshoot problems and hear what other people are doing differently. So this just gives you a little bit of a snapshot in terms of how we've engaged our students this summer, or excuse me, over this semester. Something that I think I just wanted to mention, because we keep on talking a lot about our framework and where we should work. And for any of you who have been on these calls before, you know that I can talk a very long time about this. So good news is we're having a whole nother webinar about it. So if you want to learn about how FRN has used data to actually drive our impact, so specifically about the methodology behind how we combined various data sets to determine and prioritize geographic communities we should be in, there's a whole nother webinar in a couple weeks that you can log into, and there'll be more information that goes out about it after this webinar. And with all of our webinars, please sign up even if you know you can't make it, and then you'll receive the recording after. And then of course, we're willing to talk to you about other conversations that you might want to have with us about that, or if this is something you would want to bring to your government agency, where you could look specifically at your state, or we've done these for companies where we can look at the demographics, where their different plants are located, et cetera. So that's also something we're available to do if this is of interest to you. So the last thing I want to talk about, which I alluded to before, is really about how FRN starts to hold ourselves accountable to contributing to the result of recovering surplus food to feed everyone experiencing hunger in America in a way that is beyond pounds. So we know that we can recover all the surplus food in the United States, and it still won't cure hunger because of systems that are in place to keep hunger in place. So one of the ways that we try to contribute to communities, particularly now as we work in different ways, is through both human and financial capital. So this year was our first opportunity to actually set public goals around what does it mean for us to actually establish partnerships and contribute beyond pounds to the various communities that we work in. So specifically now we have established 16 new partnerships with various nonprofits across the country as a way of getting food where it needs to go and people that we hadn't worked with before. So the Gaylord is a really great example of that, as well as some of our new farmers for who we're sourcing through the Title I pop-up farmers market program. And then we are also talking about financial resources, because so often the disinvestment in these communities started with financial and then it grew deeper. And so we are interested in putting human and financial capital back, which again, through the efforts of our students and through some of our new programs, we've already been able to surpass that goal, which is wonderful. So with that, before we go on to what we learned, Regina, is there anything you want to add to the results before we talk about what it means to us?
I just wanted to highlight something specifically that Katie said. And again, with the offering of, we are available to have, additional conversations. If there's something specific that touched you, that you're like, I wouldn't have thought about it that way, or I didn't know that, we definitely want to have those deeper conversations with you, especially if it's in an educational setting for your staff or your stakeholders. Circling back to what Katie said, that we have enough caloric intake in the United States to feed everybody who is hungry, and it's logistics, sure, getting the right food to where it needs to be is a process that must happen, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing there. But as Katie said, there are other systems at work where food is denied to people for a variety of different identifiers and reasons. And so I wrote an article not too long ago that I'll find it and put it into the chat, that highlights that volunteering isn't going to save us in this regard. Volunteering should not be the method to consistently provide food access to the people who need it. Volunteering, and I'm saying this, we are a volunteer-driven organization, is vital to how our communities can thrive. As a chronic volunteer myself, as somebody who's in the nonprofit space myself, but the idea that is how we are going to feed people, it shifts the burden away from our systems and places that burden onto our individual shoulders. When we have more resources, when we configure our systems to work better for everyone. So I just wanted to again, to use that word, give some space to what it is exactly that we're saying, and really hone in on what exactly it is that FRN visions when we say that we want to recover surplus food to feed everyone who's hungry in the United States. And then moving on to some of the learnings that we've had, every day. Every day there are so many things that we are learning. And so just to sort of recap, and to again highlight some of the things that have already been said, at this moment in time, we always have this place to talk about our learnings, and for, again, you can look at the other roundtable talk conversations that we've had for the learnings that we've incorporated over the course of the several years that we've been having these conversations, including, during the time of the pandemic, and what things looked like then, the needs of our incredible student leaders all across the United States, the needs of our stakeholders, our partner agencies rather, all across the United States, and now the needs of our direct communities as we are doing that consistent food recovery at the Gaylord in Atlanta. We're always bringing that back into how we're doing our work as we seek to recover surplus food to feed everyone who's hungry. that comprehensive solutions. Yes, Katie just spent so much of this time talking about the variety of ways FRN will show up authentically in the communities, how our student leaders are showing up authentically on their college campuses, working directly with their dining providers, going out into the communities, keeping that food right on college campuses to address student hunger. We need lots of different solutions. There is no one size fits all. We've had conversations with organizations that are looking for a one size fits all. And that's when I was talking about the different levels of what it means to there's a slowness sometimes to this work. To get into these communities, you sometimes have to address a lot of particular needs before you can even begin the food recovery. And so that comprehensive solution might seem like a no-brainer, but it's sometimes it's not. And what comprehensive looks like, what the solution looks like for a particular community varies. It just varies. And as gains are made, sometimes those solutions will need to change as well. We need to be adaptable. Katie and I talk often about the technical solution and an adaptive challenge, and I know that language might sound familiar for some of you, and so again, highlighting what we've discussed in this particular conversation, but that developing new programmatic offerings on how to engage our students. Our students started this whole movement. And as their needs have shifted over time, as our incredible students have become incredible alums, what does it look like to keep those students engaged in this work is really important to us. And we that's part of the solutions in how we think we're going to recover surplus food to feed everyone, is keeping students involved in that work. And again, when we do that, when we prioritize that in many of the offerings that we have, the work can look different. If we just bought all the surplus food, okay, if we had $700 million to do that every year, or whatever the amount is, that looks a little bit different, right? And hey, if someone wants to do that, all right, we're ready to talk. And as we are thinking about these conversations and how we are holding ourselves accountable for our bigger vision, and every year that breaks down into a workable plan for the fiscal year, for the program year, our metrics need to reflect what we are seeing on the ground, what we are learning. And so that's why, we are very, we talk a lot about what we think we're going to be able to accomplish in a year and why. And £1 million, when we begin to shift and say, okay, what do we think with our student chapter leaders across the United States, and what we're seeing, their availability to recover, their frequency, what does that actually look like in terms of what we can tell everyone will be able to recover. But as was mentioned, pounds of food, so critical, because that converts into meals, and those meals go to individuals who are unnecessarily suffering from food insecurity. That's important. And those are actual lives. So when we think about metrics, these are actual lives. When we think about the 188 amazing chapters all across the United States, comprised of incredible volunteers, and interns, and some staff, the interactions they are having within their particular communities needs to be reflected in what we are saying FRN as a national movement is able to do. And sometimes that is a little bit more, it needs a little bit more space to be able to tell the outcomes of those metrics. It's newer. It's not as quick to say pounds of food, CO2 diverted, but we are committed to talking about all of those learnings and reflecting that in our metrics, how we're holding ourselves accountable every single year.
So the only thing I'll add to that, and I saw some questions come in, so thank you for those, and please do keep them coming. So as I've been talking through my programmatic hat, now I want to put on my operations hat to say one of the things that we did 4 years ago is we internally restructured our organization. And what that has done has allowed us to have consistent results year over year over year, because we were actually able to staff the work differently from a home office perspective. So now that we have been able to establish systems, KPIs, et cetera, as we look toward the future, and we have this secure infrastructure now, we really need to get more precise about the metrics that we really think will start to turn the dial on how we start to view this issue. So we're already having those conversations. So if you do have ideas for various metrics that we could start to track in the future, things that would be helpful to you, please let us know. Again, we're not refed, so we don't necessarily have access to the vast amount of information, but we know our network and we know what we can do. So if there are specific things you as students would find helpful, please do let us know.
Amazing. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Regina. I'll transition us to the Q&A portion. As Katie mentioned, we have a couple that have come through the chat, so I'll prompt those, and then please keep your questions coming. Regina, as you were particularly talking on the last slide a bit about our learnings and understanding the holistic issues that we're addressing here at FRN, Rachel, who's an FRN alum, shared in the chat a question asking, is there educational material available that speaks to what's being discussed? Would love to learn more personally and be more informed and knowledgeable on the systems in place and other contributors to the challenges. And I know you love a good book rec, podcast rec. So like if there's anything you have to share for the folks here, please do.
Absolutely. And Rachel, thanks for that. And thanks for all that you've done for Food Recovery Network over the course of your time as an incredible alum. And I will also say, well, first, yes. Second, and when you begin to enter into the learning, know that any topic that we maybe don't feel that we're so deep in takes a little bit of time, so we can't eat the world in one bite. So I always say, just, be gentle with yourself in terms of what you know, and you probably know more than, you would. Anyway, to say that, I would actually, recommend our blog, variety of voices, variety of levels of the work, and including, some of the pieces that I've written, highlight and link to other pieces. Our partners over at ReFed, research institution that has a lot of statistics specifically on, why food recovery is one of the most valuable things we can do with surplus food. It's very cost effective to recover our food, and it just helps a lot of people right away, and it also helps our environment. So lots of data from them. Our folks over at the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic also talk a lot about particular laws. Right now, I know I haven't talked too much about the advocacy efforts of Food Recovery Network, of which we do quite a bit of work, and I know that there are some of you here that are interested in that. We had a huge success with the Food Donation Improvement Act, and so Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic talks about that quite a bit, and we're now working on the Food Date Labeling Act, why that's important as it relates to the Farm Bill. And so, we write about that, as does Harvard and the Zero Food Waste Coalition. So some of the recommendations, I also would say, and this is going to be in one of our action steps, sign up for our newsletter. There's lots of, one-off emails that we send with very pointed pieces of information around the different places within the food system in which Food Recovery Network activates. And a whole lot more, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. And if anyone else has anything in chat that's on the call, please do share in the chat for other ideas and resources. Thanks for sharing, Regina. Next, we also got a question from Reverend Bessie Donaldson, who's a hunger fighting nonprofit leader that partners with our Georgia State chapter. So thanks so much for joining. And they ask, I would like to learn more about how locations are designated. I imagine maybe specifically with the hunger fighting nonprofits, also how to get more food for distribution to families in need, seniors, children attending specifically their location.
Katie, do you want to take that one?
Sure. And when you say locations are designated, I'm assuming because you're in Atlanta, you're meaning the Title I pop-up markets. If that's not, is that what? Yes. Okay. If that's what you mean, I'm going to answer it like that. If that's not what you mean, just say in the chat that's actually not it. So how we determined where we were working in Atlanta was a combination of things. The first, as I mentioned, was us looking at a national level at disaggregated data sets, where we could see where there was the most food waste generated by higher education institutions. And that data was from the EPA. And then we overlaid that with a series of measurements about the number of people who are experiencing hunger. So we looked at SNAP, we looked at poverty rates, we looked at median income. One of the biggest indicators that we looked at to determine need, so like of the supply and the demand, was we partnered with MIT's Living Wage Center, where we actually looked at the gap between what it actually takes for people to live in a particular county and then the median income. And then we overlaid that with where's the presence of higher education institutions. Then we also overlaid that with the census data on race and ethnicity to say, okay, if there is supply, if there is demand, if there is an infrastructure, if there is an acknowledgement that there is disparities in food access, here are the counties that we need to work in, which is how we got to our county in Georgia. Which is around Atlanta. And then we worked with the Atlanta Department of Education, which was really another level to say, okay, like, what are the schools that you think could benefit from a pop-up farmers market, but also who are the administrators of that school who could actually hold that work? Because this is a partnership, right? We do need somebody to put it into a newsletter. We do need somebody to help us advise where we should physically set up on the school grounds. You know, is it by the pickup line? Is it by the sports fields? So it was a combination of large data analysis combined with local intel and really just dedicated practitioners on the ground that says, like, I know that this is a need my community has, and, you know, I'm willing to partner in a way to bring food access there. So that's how we got to the specific locations in Atlanta. And we do have a wait list, transparently. Now that we've been doing it at several schools, there's several more that want it, which is great.
Thank you, Katie. And similarly, on the same vein of the pop-up markets and our work in Atlanta, Christina had asked, what motivated the expansion to pop-up markets versus local nonprofits?
So again, I'm assuming that means, like, why did we set up farmers markets versus just giving the food directly to our local partners?
I'm assuming so, but Christina,
Okay.
please chime in the chat if it's otherwise.
Yeah. So, okay, great. Thank you. So the reason is because there are structural barriers that exist for many people that they can't access those nonprofit partners. It could be hours of operation. It could be the types of food that that particular nonprofit has. In some cases, it has to do with documentation that people are required to present before they actually get food. It has to do with hours of operation. So the determination to start the pop-up farmers markets was to remove all possible logistical operational barriers to getting the food to people who need it. So that's why.
Thank you. And then I also saw a question in our Q&A from Jane, which I answered via the Q&A, asking about Food Waste Prevention Week, which FRN is also participating in, and I can share the link in the chat as well. But that is a roundup nationwide event, virtual event with a variety of like webinars and events all talking about food waste. So Rachel, going back to your question earlier, that's another good resource to learn more. Regina, did you have anything you want to share with that?
A couple of things. Yes, absolutely. I'm proud to say that I, in representing Food Recovery Network, chaired the first ever policy committee for Food Waste Prevention Week, which is really exciting. And so within all of the offerings of the week, there are two that our committee put forward. And the one I happen to be speaking on, it's hosted by Climate Action Now, and it's with Tori Otto over at the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, and Rachel Hargrave, I believe, or Cargrave is moderating, and then there's a third speaker with us that'll come to me in a second, but it's all about we're talking about the Food Date Labeling Act specifically, and then on a broader scale around the environment, food waste, and a warming climate. And so I'm really excited about that. And then there's a conversation around the USDA's food loss and prevention guidance with a conversation with Jean Busby. So really proud that we were able to do that. And I think it's going to be a really great week. And shout out to Elaine Fiore, who has been the incredible brain behind really elevating Food Waste Prevention Week to the status that it is now. We loved working with her. She's delightful.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to keep us moving just to wrap up here. So to name a couple of action items for us here today, Katie mentioned earlier about the mapping conversation that we have that's next week. I can't believe it's already April, which also I sent something in the chat about Earth Month. Also, Reverend Bessie, we saw your comment about engaging. We'll definitely connect with you one-on-one to talk more about Atlanta. That would be really great. So we'll reach out. But yeah, next Wednesday or next week, we have our mapping conversation. So if you're interested in learning more specifically about what Katie described briefly earlier about how FRN identifies our target locations, about what are where are our target locations, how we went about landing on it, and then how we're using that data in practice, such as our work in Atlanta, but a variety of other examples, I definitely encourage you to attend that conversation. And Kimmy, if you can send that in the chat, folks can sign up. Also, Regina mentioned earlier about signing up for our newsletter, which is a great way to stay involved with what's happening at FRN, checking out our blog and our website. Also on the Earth Month link that I sent earlier, we have a variety of power hours, which is a virtual volunteering event for FRN. We have a couple of opportunities in April if you want to join. They're a really fun, engaging way to connect with other folks in this movement and be able to provide your time and energy. Also, spreading the word is really great. This is a great opportunity to increase our network and touching other parts of the network, and just sharing this information with maybe someone that's a college student or someone that's interested in this effort, just kind of spreading the word about food waste and food recovery, which continues to grow each and every day. And we want to be able to support as many folks as possible that want to engage in this work. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Regina, with another ask and wrapping us up.
Great. And again, I wanted to talk about for those of you where it might be in your budgets to make a donation to Food Recovery Network. I understand I'm talking to alums. I understand I'm talking to students engaged in this work. I understand I'm talking to funders who support our work and understand what it is that we are trying to do. And I understand I'm talking to people who have differences within their budget. So with all of that, honor and respect, a big thank you and expression of gratitude. We ask for donations, during this time of our roundtable talks, as an underscoring of that celebration I talked about. So much of what we are trying to do at Food Recovery Network is working. It has taken a lot of effort. It has taken a lot of community support. Again, I know exactly who I'm talking to on this webinar call. It has taken a lot of having conversations that maybe didn't quite lead to what we thought it was going to lead to. This work is uncharted in a lot of ways, and to make the progress that we know that we can make in that celebration, we know that we must continue to seek additional funding. ReFed will have us know that, in terms of recovery efforts, again, one of the most cost-effective things that we can do will also spur the economy by creating, additional jobs. Annually, it's about $1.4 billion under invested in. So again, we want to celebrate what we're able to do, knowing that we must continue to forge ahead with all these programmatic interventions, these programmatic highlights and beautiful things that are happening. So it is with all of that that I say to all of you, if you are in a space to make a contribution, we would be very grateful. And if you can encourage others to get to know the work of FRN, have a conversation with us in the hopes that they too might be able to make a contribution, we would be very grateful, with respect and with love. Thank you for your consideration. So if you don't know me that well, one of the things that you will learn today is I am a huge fan of James Baldwin. And we just celebrated Jimmy's, if I could be so bold, Mr. James Baldwin's birthday in February. He would have been 100 years old. And this is a quote that really means a lot to me. Perhaps you've heard this before, but this is it calls directly into how Food Recovery Network is doing our work. We see some things that we think need to be changed, and it's uncomfortable sometimes to really look hard at the fact that for as long as we've had this place called the United States, people have been hungry. They've had not easeful access to the food that they deserve. And the reasons for that have changed over the course of history, over the course of time. We know this, and now FRN is working so diligently with our incredible stakeholders, our students, to really face this and to really create that systematic change that we believe that we can have a big hand in contributing towards. So just thank you all so much for your willingness to hear from us, to learn together, to thank you for your awesome questions. I hope, once we all conclude from our time together in this moment, that our minds continue to just be in this space. And, as we engage with other people outside of this conversation, I do hope that the light of this conversation can be part of your interactions, after we conclude our time together. So just thank you all so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate all of your times. Before we close out here today, we have one last poll as an action-oriented way to see how you might engage after this conversation with all these amazing learnings and ways that you want to engage. What do you think one action item you'll take out of the conversation here today? And with that, once you answer, we appreciate your contributions and your engagement here with us today. And yeah, thank you for your time and amazing support for this network. Amazing. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
See you at the next conversation. Thank you all.
Bye all.